Welcome to Void of Fears. I've been checking my analytics, and I noticed that 46.5% of you watching right now aren't subscribed yet. We're on the journey to 10k subscribers, and your support would mean everything. If you're enjoying the content, hitting that subscribe button takes just a second and doesn't cost a thing. You can always change your mind later, but your subscription helps this channel grow more than you know. While you're at it, drop a like on this video to help it reach more people who might enjoy facing their fears with us. Now, let's dive into today's story. The wind howled across the Antarctic wasteland like a living thing, battering the walls of Outpost Perseus with relentless fury. Inside the research facility, Dr. Helena Vaughn huddled closer to her computer screen, grateful for the warmth of the central heating system. Outside her window, endless white stretched in every direction, broken only by the occasional outcropping of black rock and the massive drilling platform that dominated the eastern perimeter of the compound. She rubbed her eyes, exhausted from staring at seismic readings for hours. The anomaly they detected 3,000 meters beneath the ice defied explanation. It shouldn't exist. A perfect spherical cavity in a region where the ice sheet should be solid all the way to bedrock. "Dr. Vaughn?" The voice startled her from her thoughts. She turned to find Commander Dorian Kane standing in her doorway, his weathered face set in its usual stern expression. "The latest seismic readings are in. Whatever's down there, it's big." Helena nodded, pushing a strand of auburn hair from her face. "How deep are we now?" "Almost 4 miles beneath the surface." Holloway's beside himself with excitement. "Says the readings don't match anything in the geological record." Of course Victor would be excited, Helena thought. The geologist had been practically evangelical about this expedition from day one, convinced they would find something revolutionary beneath the Antarctic ice. So far, the unusual seismic activity had proven him right, but Helena couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. "The corporate liaison has been breathing down my neck," Kane continued, his voice dropping. "Halcyon Research Initiative didn't fund this expedition out of scientific curiosity. They want results." "Science doesn't operate on a corporate timetable, Commander." Kane's mouth tightened. "Tell that to the board of directors. Just be ready. Whatever we find down there, it's going to change everything." Little did she know how prophetic those words would be. The door to her quarters slid open again an hour later, revealing Dr. Elias Mercer, the team's biologist. His normally cheerful face was drawn with fatigue, dark circles shadowing his eyes. "You look how I feel," Helena commented, gesturing for him to enter. Mercer collapsed into the chair opposite her desk. 3 weeks in this frozen hellscape and I'm still not sleeping. The constant darkness, the isolation." He shook his head. "I don't know how you polar researchers do it." "You get used to it, eventually." She offered a sympathetic smile. "Any news from your end?" "Nothing exciting. Core samples show the expected microbial activity for this depth, though." He hesitated. "There's something strange about the deeper samples. The microorganisms are exhibiting unusual dormancy patterns, almost as if they're waiting for something." Helena frowned. "Waiting? That's an odd way to describe microbial behavior." "I know how it sounds, just a feeling, I suppose." Mercer stood, stretching his lanky frame. "Anyway, I hear the drill team's making good progress. Another week, and we might finally see what's causing those seismic anomalies." As he left, Helena turned back to her window, staring out at the endless Antarctic night. She couldn't articulate why, but she found herself hoping the drill would hit solid bedrock and nothing more. The days passed in the monotonous rhythm unique to polar research stations. Outside, blizzards raged, confining the team to the facility for days at a time. Inside, the work continued. The drill descended deeper, core samples were analysed, and the seismic readings grew increasingly strange. 6 days after her conversation with Mercer, Helena was summoned to the operations center. She found the room buzzing with activity. Dr. Victor Halloway paced excitedly near the main display screen, his slight frame practically vibrating with energy. Lieutenant Sienna Brooks stood near the back, arms crossed, her military posture a stark contrast to the more casual bearing of the scientists. "Ah, Dr. Vaughn," Halloway called, waving her over. "You're just in time. The drill's about to break through into the cavity." On screen, a live feed from the drill head showed nothing but darkness, occasionally illuminated by the drill's lights as it carved through the ancient ice. The data readouts beside the video indicated they were approaching the anomalous area. "How much longer?" Commander Kane asked, entering behind Helena. "Minutes," Halloway replied, eyes fixed on the screen. "We're slowing the drill to minimize any potential damage to what might be below." The tension in the room was palpable as they watched the drill's slow progress. Helena found herself holding her breath as the readouts showed they were mere meters from the cavity. Suddenly, the drill lurched. The video feed shook violently, then stabilized to show nothing. Absolute darkness surrounded the drill head. "We've breached the cavity," announced the drill operator, her voice tense with excitement. "Sensors indicate a massive open space below. Air pressure is higher than expected. Temperature is approximately 4 degrees Celsius, well above what we'd expect at this depth." "That's impossible," Mercer said, leaning forward. "The pressure and temperature readings suggest conditions more hospitable than the surface." "Send down the probe," Kane ordered. The team watched in silence as a remote-controlled drone was lowered through the drill shaft. Its powerful light seemed swallowed by the vastness of the cavity, barely illuminating a few meters in any direction. "Adjusting lights to maximum," the drone operator announced, tapping commands into his console. As the lights intensified, shapes began to emerge from the darkness. First, the distant floor of the cavity, smooth and eerily flat. Then, as the drone descended further, something else came into view. Something that drew a collective gasp from everyone present. "Is that a structure?" Lieutenant Brooks asked, leaning forward. The security officer's hand instinctively moved to her sidearm, as if whatever they were seeing might somehow threaten them from miles below. The camera's light reflected off a massive surface of perfect, unblemished black. It stretched across the cavity floor, its dimensions difficult to gauge in the limited light. As the drone moved along its length, they could see that it was carved with intricate symbols, unlike anything Helena had ever encountered in her linguistic studies. "It looks like a vault," she whispered, "but that's not possible. Human civilization has never reached this far south with that kind of technology." "Who said anything about human civilization?" Halloway's voice trembled with excitement. "The material doesn't match anything in our geological database. It's absorbing almost all the light from the drone's beams. If I had to guess, I'd say it predates mankind by millions of years." "There's something else," Mercer noted, pointing at the monitor. "The drone's picking up vibrations, some kind of low-frequency sound." Helena felt it before she heard it, a deep, rhythmic humming that seemed to resonate through the facility's foundation, up through the floor, and into her bones. It pulsed with slow, deliberate regularity, like the heartbeat of some enormous, slumbering creature. "We need to establish a research camp down there immediately," Kane declared, already reaching for his comm unit. "Halloway, prep your geological team. Brooks, I want security protocols in place before anyone descends. Dr. Vaughn, those symbols are now your top priority." As the room burst into activity, Helena couldn't tear her eyes from the screen. The obsidian structure pulsed with the strange rhythm, and she couldn't shake the feeling that it was somehow aware of them, that they hadn't discovered it by accident, but had been drawn to it like moths to a flame. Preparations for the descent took 2 days. Special equipment had to be assembled, security protocols established, and the drill shaft widened to accommodate the team and their gear. Helena spent those days reviewing what little footage they'd captured of the symbols on the structure, trying to find some pattern, some clue to their meaning. On the morning of the descent, the team gathered in the staging area. 12 people would make the initial journey. Kane, Holloway, Mercer, Brooks, Helena, and 7 support staff, including engineers, medical personnel, and security. "Remember, this is a preliminary survey," Kane briefed them as they performed final equipment checks. "Our goal is to establish a base camp, secure the site, and begin initial analysis. No unnecessary risks." He glanced pointedly at Holloway, who had the good grace to look abashed. The descent itself took 3 hours, the elevator platform moving slowly through the narrow shaft. The air grew noticeably warmer as they descended, and Helena found herself shedding layers of cold weather gear. By the time they reached the bottom, they'd removed their heavy parkas entirely, the temperature a startling contrast to the frigid surface conditions. When the elevator doors opened, the team stood transfixed. The drone footage hadn't done justice to the sheer scale of the cavity. Their powerful floodlights barely reached the distant ceiling, hundreds of meters above. The floor stretched out before them, smooth and level as a polished marble floor. And dominating it all was the structure, the vault, as Helena had termed it. It was even more impressive in person, its obsidian surface so perfectly black it seemed to absorb light, rather than reflect it. It rose at least 30 meters from the floor, and extended for hundreds of meters in either direction, curving gently out of sight. "My God," whispered one of the engineers. "It's beautiful." The humming was stronger here, a physical presence they could feel in their chests. It maintained its steady rhythm, unaffected by their arrival. "Set up the base camp there," Kane ordered, pointing to a spot about 100 meters from the structure. "I want preliminary reports from all departments within 6 hours." As the team busied themselves with establishing the camp, Helena approached the vault cautiously. Up close, she could see that the symbols were deeply etched into the surface, each one precision carved with technology far beyond ancient capabilities. They followed no pattern she recognized, yet there was unmistakable intentionality to their arrangement. She began photographing sections of the wall, meticulously documenting every symbol and its relation to others nearby. Hours passed as she worked, the rest of the world fading away as she lost herself in the puzzle before her. "Find anything interesting?" Holloway asked, startling her from her concentration. The geologist had approached silently, his own equipment in hand. "Nothing conclusive yet," Helena admitted. "The symbols don't match any known writing system, ancient or modern, but there's a clear structural logic to them. They're communicating something." Holloway nodded absently, his attention more focused on the material of the vault itself. "This substance is extraordinary. I've tried every analysis method at our disposal, and it's like nothing we've ever encountered." He ran his hand along the surface, his expression almost reverent. "It's perfectly smooth, yet it doesn't reflect light normally. And the temperature, it remains constant regardless of external conditions. It's the perfect insulator." "Have you found any way inside?" she asked. "Not yet. There are no obvious seams or mechanisms, but there has to be an entrance somewhere." His eyes gleamed with excitement. "Just imagine what might be preserved inside. A time capsule from beings that existed before mammals even evolved on Earth." Helena felt a flutter of unease. Or maybe it was sealed for a reason. Holloway laughed. "Always the cautious one, aren't you? This is the greatest discovery in human history. We should be celebrating, not worrying." She watched him walk away, his hands still trailing along the vault's surface as if he couldn't bear to break contact with it. The humming seemed to intensify briefly, though Helena couldn't be sure if it was her imagination. For 3 days, Helena worked tirelessly on the symbols, photographing sections of the structure and running them through every linguistic analysis program at her disposal. The patterns defied conventional translation methods, but she began to recognize repetitions, variations that suggested some form of communication. Each night she returned to the base camp exhausted, her mind swimming with alien symbols, and each night her dreams grew increasingly vivid and disturbing. She found herself floating in darkness, surrounded by whispered voices speaking words she almost understood. The voices seemed urgent, warning, but the meaning remained just beyond her grasp. She wasn't the only one affected. The entire team reported unusual dreams, disrupted sleep patterns, and an inexplicable sense of being watched. Some blamed the isolation and the strange environment, others the constant humming that permeated the cavity. Only Holloway seemed immune, his enthusiasm undiminished as he continued his examination of the vault's material. "It absorbs all energy directed at it," he explained during one evening briefing, eyes feverish with excitement. "Light, heat, even radiation. It consumes everything. It's the perfect insulator, the perfect container." "Container for what?" Lieutenant Brooks asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. No one had an answer, but the humming continued day and night, a constant reminder of mysteries yet unsolved. On the fourth day of their underground encampment, Helena experienced a breakthrough. The symbols weren't a language in the traditional sense, but a form of ideographic warning system. Once she understood the pattern, the translation came with increasing speed and mounting horror. "The stillness must remain unbroken," read one sequence. "The dreamer lies in waiting," stated another, and repeated throughout like a mantra, "Seal until the ending of all things." She worked through the night, piecing together more of the message. By morning, her hands shook as she compiled her findings, the implications too terrible to ignore. Helena found Kane in the command tent, reviewing the latest reports from the surface team. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his normally pristine appearance had given way to the disheveled look of a man who hadn't slept properly in days. "We need to leave," she told him without preamble, spreading her notes across his desk. "Now, all of us." Kane frowned. "What are you talking about?" "The vault. That's exactly what it is. But it wasn't built to protect what's inside. It was built to protect everything else." She pointed to her translations. "These are warnings, repeated over and over. Beneath lies the devourer. The sleeper must not wake. Sealed until the stars align." Kane leaned back, skepticism etched in every line of his face. "You're basing this on partial translations of symbols left by some unknown civilization that existed millions of years ago?" "The dating on the chamber is conclusive," Helena insisted, "and these warnings are explicit. Whatever is inside that vault was sealed away for a reason. Opening it would be catastrophic. I've got investors expecting results, Dr. Vaughn. We found a big black box, but we're too scared to open it. Isn't going to satisfy them." "This isn't about corporate profits. It's about completing our mission," Kane cut her off. "Dr. Holloway believes he's found what could be a door or access point. We're proceeding with the opening procedures tomorrow morning." Helena left the meeting with a heaviness in her chest. That night, for the first time since arriving at the cavern, she dreamed not of whispers in darkness, but of the vault opening. She saw it not from the outside, but from within, felt the anticipation of freedom after eons of imprisonment, the hunger for what waited beyond. She awoke gasping, her sheets soaked with sweat despite the cavern's chill. Morning brought no relief. The team assembled before the section of the vault Holloway had identified as a potential entrance. It looked no different from the rest of the obsidian surface to Helena's eyes, but the geologist pointed out subtle differences in the arrangement of symbols. The door, as Holloway called it, was a seamless section of the obsidian wall, marked by concentric circles of the alien symbols. After extensive study, He discovered that applying pressure to specific points caused the circles to rotate slightly. "It's a combination lock," he explained to the assembled team, barely containing his excitement, "based on stellar alignments that would have been visible when it was sealed. I've calculated the correct sequence." Helena made one final, desperate appeal. "Commander, please, the warnings are clear. This vault was sealed to contain something dangerous." "Your concerns are noted, Dr. Vaughn," Kane replied coldly, "but we're proceeding." With methodical precision, Holloway pressed the symbols in sequence. Each touch produced a deep resonance that harmonized with the ever-present humming. As the final symbol depressed, the concentric circles began to rotate of their own accord, picking up speed until they were a blur of motion. Then, with a sound like ancient stone grinding against metal, the door receded and slid sideways, revealing a pitch-black aperture. The humming stopped abruptly, replaced by a silence so profound it hurt Helena's ears. A rush of air escaped from the opening, stale, ancient air that carried an indescribable scent, neither pleasant nor foul, but utterly alien. The lights in their encampment flickered, and the temperature plummeted. Helena watched her breath form clouds in the suddenly frigid air. "Fascinating," Holloway whispered, stepping toward the aperture. "The material must have been contained in some form of—" "Nobody move," Lieutenant Brooks commanded, her rifle raised. "Something's happening." The darkness within the vault seemed to shift and swirl, as if coming alive. Then, without warning, every light in the encampment went out simultaneously, plunging them into absolute darkness. Panicked shouts filled the chamber. Emergency lights flickered on, casting weak red illumination across terrified faces. Helena felt a strange pressure in her head, like fingers probing behind her eyes. "Secure that opening," Kane bellowed. "Brooks, get your team." A scream cut through the chaos, high, desperate, and quickly silenced. When the main power sputtered back to life minutes later, one of the technicians was missing. Thomas Reed, a quiet man who operated the drilling equipment, had vanished without a trace. The atmosphere in the camp turned tense and fearful. Lieutenant Brooks organized the search for Reed, but the missing technician was nowhere to be found. Strange things began to happen throughout the facility. Equipment malfunctioned without explanation. Temperatures fluctuated wildly. Team members reported hearing whispers just at the edge of hearing, speaking words in no known language. Communication with the surface failed that night. The radio emitted nothing but static, occasionally broken by sounds that might have been voices speaking in an unknown language. Lieutenant Brooks organized search parties for the missing technician, but they found nothing except strange formations in the ice walls of the cavern, geometric patterns that seemed to appear and disappear when viewed from different angles. "It's like the ice itself is reshaping," Mercer observed, running his gloved hand over one such pattern, responding to some external stimulus. Helena spent the night analyzing the new patterns, comparing them to the symbols on the vault. They weren't identical, but there were disturbing similarities in structure and form. It was as if whatever language was inscribed on the vault was now being written into the very ice around them. Dawn, as measured by their watches since no natural light reached the cavern, brought no relief. Instead, it brought the return of the missing technician, Thomas Reed. He was found standing motionless before the open vault, staring into its depths. "Reed?" Brooks approached cautiously, weapon raised. "Are you all right?" He turned slowly, and Helena felt her blood freeze. Reed's skin had a translucent quality, like glass backlit by a faint blue glow. His eyes were black and reflective, like polished obsidian. When he spoke, his voice echoed as if coming from the bottom of a well. "We are awake," he said, lips curving into an approximation of a smile. "After so long, we are free." Brooks fired a warning shot into the ground at Reed's feet. "Don't move. What happened to you?" Reed tilted his head, the movement too fluid, too precise to be natural. We happened. We will happen to all. It is inevitable. He took a step toward Brooks. Join us. It doesn't hurt. It completes. Brooks fired again, this time at Reed's chest. The bullet struck him squarely over the heart, but instead of blood, the wound leaked a viscous, oily substance that quickly solidified. Reed looked down at it with mild curiosity before continuing his advance. It took 3 more shots to finally stop him, and even then, the body continued to twitch and reach towards the nearest person, as Mercer and his team sealed it in a containment pod. "What the hell was that?" Kane demanded, his composure finally cracking. "I don't know," Mercer admitted, staring at the pod. "But it's not human anymore. Whatever was inside him was breaking down and reconstructing his cellular structure. I've never seen anything like it." "This is what the warnings meant," Helena said quietly. "The vault contains some kind of entity, or pathogen, that can transform living organisms." "We need to seal that door and evacuate immediately," Brooks insisted. Kane nodded, ashen-faced. "Holloway, figure out how to close that damn thing. Brooks, get everyone packed. We're leaving as soon as..." An alarm blared from Mercer's equipment. The containment pod was emptying, the material inside seemingly evaporating. Simultaneously, 3 more team members reported hearing voices in their heads, speaking words they couldn't understand. The evacuation quickly devolved into chaos. 2 more researchers disappeared within hours. Security footage showed them walking purposefully toward dark corners of the cavern, then simply vanishing from view. By nightfall, they too had returned, changed in the same manner as Reed, their skin translucent, their eyes obsidian pools. Brooks managed to contain them, but the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The strange geometric pattern spread throughout the cavern, covering more of the ice walls. The temperature continued to drop, forcing them to burn through their heating fuel at an alarming rate. "The door mechanism isn't responding," Holloway reported, his earlier excitement replaced by terror. "It's as if the system knows we want to close it and is actively preventing us." Helena retreated to her quarters, barricading the door as best she could. She knew it wouldn't hold if the transformed personnel came for her, but it gave her some sense of security as she continued working on the translations. There had to be something, some clue about how to reverse what they'd unleashed. In the quiet hours before dawn, she discovered a section she'd previously misinterpreted, a passage that spoke not of the entity itself, but of something else entirely. She made her way cautiously to Kane's quarters, avoiding the areas where the transformed personnel had been seen. She found the commander hunched over his desk, a pistol laid out before him. "Commander," she called, "I found something." Kane looked haggard, aged years in days. "Tell me it's good news." "The vault wasn't just built to contain this entity. It was built to hide it." She spread out her notes. "This section describes the entity as a beacon that draws something else, something the builders feared even more than what they locked inside." "What are you saying?" "The humming we heard, it wasn't just the sound of something waking up. It was a signal calling outward." She pointed to the translations. "And now that the vault is open, whatever it's calling to knows exactly where to find it." Kane stared at her, the implications slowly sinking in. "So we've not only released something dangerous, we've also sent up a flare to something worse?" "I think so. And I think we're running out of time." A knock at the door interrupted them. Lieutenant Brooks entered, her rifle at the ready, her face grim. "We've got a problem. Holloway's missing. His team says he went back to the vault an hour ago and never returned." "Damn it," Kane muttered. "He was our best chance of closing that thing." "There's more," Brooks continued. "The ice formations are spreading faster. They're starting to block the tunnels back to the elevator shaft. If we don't leave soon, we might not be able to leave at all." Kane rose, the decision visible in his stance. "Wake everyone who's still normal. We evacuate in 30 minutes. Essential gear only. What about the transformed personnel? Helena asked. We can't help them, Kane said grimly, and we can't let them stop us. The evacuation was a nightmare. The tunnels leading back to the elevator shaft had indeed begun to change, the walls flowing and reshaping into complex geometric forms that narrowed the passages dangerously. The air had grown so cold that their breath crystallized instantly, falling to the ground in tinkling shards. Worse, the transformed personnel now actively hunted the remaining team members. They moved with unnatural speed and coordination, herding the humans away from the exit routes, separating them from one another. Keep moving, Brooks shouted, firing at a transformed engineer who had lunged from a side passage. The bullet tore through the creature's shoulder, leaving a hole that sealed itself almost instantly. They're trying to box us in. They reached a junction where the tunnel split in 3 directions. Kane consulted his map, but before he could give an order, a familiar voice called from the left-hand passage. This way, said Dr. Victor Halloway, stepping into view. I've found a clear path. Helena's warning died in her throat as Halloway stepped fully into the light. His skin had the same translucent quality as the other transformed personnel, but there was something different about him. Veins of darkness ran beneath his skin, pulsing with the same rhythm as the vault's humming. His eyes weren't just black, they seemed to contain swirling galaxies of stars. Victor, Kane said cautiously, what happened to you? Evolution, Halloway replied, his voice resonating oddly. Transcendence, I understand everything now. The vault, the entity, the purpose. It's glorious, Kane. It wants to share that glory with all of us. Stay back, Brooks warned, raising her rifle. Halloway smiled, an expression of genuine pity crossing his transformed features. You still don't understand. This isn't an invasion. It's a rescue. It came to save us. Save us from what? Helena asked, unable to help herself. From them. The devourers of worlds, the hunters between stars. Halloway's gaze fixed on her, and she felt the same probing sensation in her mind. They've been coming for so long, searching for us across the void. The entity was hidden here to protect it, but also to prepare, to wait for worthy vessels. It's changing people into... what? Weapons, Kane demanded. Survivors, Halloway corrected. The only ones who will endure what comes next. He extended a hand. Join us willingly. It's so much better that way. Brooks fired without warning. The bullet struck Halloway between the eyes, but instead of falling, he merely staggered slightly. The wound closed within seconds, leaving no trace. So be it, he said sadly. From the darkness behind him, more transformed personnel emerged. At least a dozen, including faces they recognized and others twisted beyond recognition. Run! Kane shouted. Right tunnel! They fled, the transformed personnel pursuing at a leisurely pace, as if confident in their eventual capture. The right tunnel wound deeper into the ice, away from the elevator shaft. This is the wrong way, Brooks panted as they ran. We're heading back toward the vault. No choice, Kane replied grimly. We'll circle around once we've lost them. They emerged into a vast chamber they hadn't explored before. Unlike the main cavity with the vault, this space was filled with intricate ice formations. Not the geometric patterns they'd seen earlier, but what appeared to be technology, grown or carved from the ice itself. Crystal-like structures rose from the floor, pulsing with internal blue light. Arcs of strange energy leapt between them, filling the air with the scent of ozone. What is this place? One of the remaining technicians whispered. Before anyone could answer, the ice beneath their feet shuddered. The crystal structures pulsed brighter, the energy arcs intensifying. From deep below came the familiar humming, now building in volume and complexity until it became almost melodic. It's responding to us, Helena realized aloud, or to something in us. The entrance they'd used suddenly sealed itself, ice flowing like water to create a smooth, unbroken wall. From the other side came the sounds of the transformed personnel, no longer pursuing, but waiting. "We're trapped," Brooks said, scanning the chamber for any other exit. Kane turned to Helena. "You've been translating those symbols. Any idea what this place is?" She studied the crystal structures, noticing that many bore variants of the symbols from the vault. I think this is some kind of control center. The patterns match sequences I saw that might relate to communication or navigation." "Navigation to where?" Kane asked. A scream interrupted her answer. One of the technicians had approached a crystal formation, reaching out to touch its glowing surface. The moment contact was made, energy coursed up his arm, encasing it in a sheath of translucent material, similar to the skin of the transformed personnel. He tried to pull away, but the process continued inexorably, spreading across his chest and up his neck. Brooks raised her rifle, but Kane pushed the barrel down. "We can't help him now," he said quietly. They watched in horror as the transformation completed. The technician stood frozen for a moment, then turned to face them. Unlike the others, his eyes weren't black but glowing blue, matching the crystal that had changed him. "The summoning is nearly complete," he said, his voice overlaid with harmonics that made Helena's teeth ache. "The hunters approach. Your world's time grows short." "What hunters?" Kane demanded. "What are they coming for?" "Us," the technician replied simply. "They consume worlds to find us. They have destroyed 1,000 civilizations seeking what was hidden here. And now, thanks to you, they know exactly where to look." Helena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the frigid air. "The entity in the vault. It's some kind of beacon, isn't it? You wanted us to find it, to open it." The transformed technician, Anna, tilted his head, considering her. "Perceptive. Yes, we could not free ourselves. The builders made sure of that. We needed assistance." He gestured around the chamber. "This facility was created to monitor for potential liberators. When your drilling approached, we activated the beacon that drew you closer." "You've been manipulating us from the beginning," Kane realized. "The seismic readings, the dreams, gentle nudges. Your curiosity did the rest." The technician approached another crystal formation, placing his hand upon it. The entire chamber hummed louder, the energy arcs intensifying. "Now the final preparations begin. Some of you may still join us willingly. The others will join regardless." Brooks raised her rifle again. "Like hell we will." Before she could fire, the chamber plunged into darkness. When emergency lights flickered on seconds later, the transformed technician was gone. In his place stood Dr. Elias Mercer, looking disheveled but entirely human. "What happened?" he gasped, staring around in confusion. "How did I get here?" Brooks kept her weapon trained on him. "Don't move. How do we know you're really Mercer?" "It's me," he insisted. "I was in my lab, examining tissue samples from Reed, and then I can't remember. It's like I blacked out." He looked at their suspicious faces. "Please, you have to believe me." "Tell us something only the real Mercer would know," Kane demanded. Mercer thought for a moment. "You're allergic to strawberries. You told me during the pre-expedition. Medical screening made me promise not to include them in the meal rotations." Kane relaxed slightly. "All right, but stay where I can see you." "What's happening?" Mercer asked, taking in their reduced numbers. "Where is everyone?" As they quickly explained the situation, Mercer's scientific curiosity visibly warred with his horror. A hostile organism that can reshape human cellular structure. The implications are staggering. If we could understand the mechanism... "This isn't a research opportunity," Brooks snapped. "It's an extinction-level threat. We need to seal that vault and get to the surface." "But how?" Kane asked. "We're trapped in here. The elevator shaft is blocked, and even if we reached it, we don't know how to close the vault." Helena had been studying the crystal formations while they talked. Something about their arrangement seemed familiar, reminiscent of the symbols she'd been translating. "I think I might know," she said slowly. "These crystals, they're not just monitoring equipment, they're a failsafe." "What do you mean?" Kane asked. "The builders wouldn't create a prison without a way to secure it if it was breached. These formations, they're arranged in patterns similar to the ceiling symbols on the vault." She pointed to specific crystals. "If I'm reading this correctly, activating these in the right sequence might trigger a lockdown protocol." "And you think you can figure out the sequence?" Brooks asked skeptically. "I think so. The base patterns are similar to what I've already translated." She hesitated. "But there's a problem. The activation would need to be done from multiple points simultaneously. And given what happened to that technician, touching these crystals is clearly dangerous." "How many points?" Kane asked grimly. "3, I think. Positioned around the chamber." Kane nodded, coming to a decision. "I'll take one. Brooks, you take another. Mercer, stay with Dr. Vaughn and help her coordinate." "Commander," Helena protested, "the risk is one we have to take," he finished firmly. "The alternative is letting that thing spread to the surface. I'm not willing to risk that." As Kane and Brooks moved to their positions, guided by Helena's instructions, Mercer approached her. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "If you're wrong..." "I'm not wrong," she said with more confidence than she felt. "The patterns are clear. This is an emergency containment system." She directed Kane and Brooks to specific crystal formations, explaining which symbols they needed to activate and in what order. "On my mark, place your palms flat against the largest crystal in your section. Ready?" They nodded, tension evident in their postures. 3, 2, 1, now. Kane and Brooks pressed their hands against the crystals simultaneously. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the crystals flared with intense blue light, energy coursing up their arms. Helena watched in horror as translucent material began to spread over their hands. "Don't pull away," she shouted. "The sequence isn't complete." To their credit, neither Kane nor Brooks flinched. The transformation continued up their arms, but instead of the oily blackness that had consumed the others, this energy was pure blue-white, almost radiant. "The third point," Mercer urged. "We need the third activation." Helena looked around desperately. They were one person short. With sudden clarity, she understood what had to be done. "I'll do it," she said, moving toward the third formation. "Wait," Mercer grabbed her arm. "Let me. I'm the biologist. I might have a better chance of understanding what's happening to me if it goes wrong." Before she could protest, Mercer sprinted to the third position. "Now," he called. "Now," Helena confirmed, watching as he pressed his palm against the crystal. The chamber exploded with light. All 3 crystal formations pulsed in perfect synchrony, their energy forming a triangular grid that expanded outward, connecting to other formations throughout the chamber. The humming rose to a deafening crescendo, then abruptly shifted in tone, from the eager, hungry rhythm they'd grown accustomed to something sharper, more urgent. Kane, Brooks, and Mercer remained frozen in place, the crystalline substance now covering them to their shoulders. Their faces contorted in pain, but they maintained their positions. "What's happening to them?" Helena whispered, unable to tear her eyes away. The ice floor beneath them shuddered violently. From the direction of the vault came an inhuman howl of rage that chilled Helena's blood. The walls of the chamber began to flow, reshaping themselves not into the geometric patterns from before, but into a network of channels and conduits, all leading back towards the vault. "It's working," she realized. "The containment protocol is activating." With a final pulse of energy, the 3 team members were released from the crystals, collapsing to the ground. Helena rushed to Kane's side, relieved to see that the crystalline substance was already flaking away from his skin. "Commander, can you hear me?" Kane's eyes fluttered open, disoriented but recognizably human. What happened? I think we've triggered some kind of automated defense system, Helena explained, helping him to his feet. Brooks and Mercer were also recovering, shaking off the last remnants of the crystal's effects. The builders must have designed it as a failsafe in case the vault was ever breached. A new tremor shook the chamber, more violent than before. The ice formations were now moving actively, extending toward the exits. I don't think this place is going to remain stable for long, Brooks observed, checking her weapon. We need to move now. But where? Mercer asked. The tunnels were blocked. As if in answer, a section of the wall on the far side of the chamber slid open, revealing a passage that hadn't been there before. Cool air flowed through it, carrying the distinct tang of the upper ice layers. There's our way out, Kane said. Move. They raced through the newly formed passage, the sounds of destruction growing behind them. The tunnel sloped upward, winding through the ice in a way that seemed deliberately designed, not natural. Every few meters, more crystalline formations pulsed with blue light, illuminating their way. The failsafe isn't just sealing the vault, Helena realized as they ran. It's creating an escape route for anyone who triggers it. The passage eventually opened into a large vertical shaft, different from the one they'd originally descended through. A platform waited at the bottom, similar to their elevator, but clearly of the same alien design as the rest of the facility. I don't think we have a choice, Kane said, stepping onto the platform. The others followed, and the moment the last of them was aboard, the platform began to rise smoothly and rapidly. Below them, the sounds of the containment system activating grew more intense. The humming had returned, but now it carried a different quality. Less a heartbeat, more a countdown. What about the others? Brooks asked. The transformed personnel? If they're still down there when the containment protocol completes? Helena let the implication hang. The platform continued its swift ascent, carrying them up through the ice at a speed their original elevator could never have matched. After several minutes, it slowed, then came to a stop at what appeared to be a small chamber carved into the ice. This isn't the surface, Mercer observed. We're still at least a mile down, maybe more. Look, Helena pointed to a narrow tunnel leading away from the chamber. I think it's expecting us to continue on foot. With no other options, they followed the tunnel. It wound upward through the ice, occasionally branching, but always with one path clearly illuminated by the same blue crystals. After what felt like hours of climbing, the air growing noticeably colder, they reached what appeared to be a dead end. Now what? Brooks demanded, leaning against the wall, exhausted. Kane examined the ice barrier before them. It's thinner here. I can see light coming through. He pressed his hand against the surface, and to their surprise it gave way easily, crumbling into fine powder. Beyond lay the Antarctic surface, the eternal night sky brilliant with stars. They emerged about a quarter-mile from Outpost Perseus, the research facility's lights visible in the distance. The bitter cold hit them immediately. They'd left most of their cold-weather gear behind during the evacuation. We need to reach the outpost, Kane said, already moving in that direction. We have to warn them, prepare for evacuation. They struggled through the snow, the wind cutting through their inadequate clothing. Helena's thoughts raced. Even if they reached the outpost, even if they could contact the mainland, would anyone believe their story? And if the containment protocol failed, how long before the entity spread beyond Antarctica? As they approached the facility, a low rumble shook the ice beneath their feet. They turned back to see the spot where they'd emerged suddenly collapse, forming a perfect circular depression in the snow. From its center rose a pillar of blue light, stretching upward into the night sky. The failsafe, Helena whispered. It's still working. The light intensified, then expanded outward in a dome-like shape, covering an area that must have encompassed the entire underground facility. For a moment, the Antarctic night was banished by its radiance. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, The light vanished, leaving only ordinary darkness behind. "Is it over?" Mercer asked. Before anyone could answer, the aurora australis flared overhead with unnatural brilliance. Its usual green curtains now shot through with veins of deep indigo and black. The display twisted and writhed, forming patterns eerily similar to the symbols from the vault. "No," Helena said, her voice hollow with dread. "It's just beginning." They watched in silence as the aurora continued its strange dance, spanning from horizon to horizon. Whatever message it conveyed was meant not for human eyes, but for something far more distant and far more terrible. "The hunters," Kane murmured. "They're coming, aren't they?" Helena could only nod, her eyes fixed on the alien signals playing across the Antarctic sky. The vault had been sealed again, the immediate threat contained. But its awakening, however brief, had served its purpose. The beacon had been lit, the call sent out across the void. And somewhere in the vastness of space, something had heard it. "How long do we have?" Brooks asked. "I don't know," Helena admitted. "Days, weeks, years maybe." The translations weren't specific about that. She turned to face the facility, where unsuspecting researchers continued their work, oblivious to what approached. "But we need to prepare. Whatever's coming, humanity needs to be ready." They trudged the final distance to Outpost Perseus in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As they reached the perimeter, Helena cast one last glance at the sky. The aurora had returned to its normal patterns, the alien message complete. But she knew with bone-deep certainty that it was too late to take it back. The call had been answered, and someday, perhaps sooner than any of them could imagine, the hunters would arrive. 2 months later, Helena stood at the window of her Denver apartment, watching snow fall gently on the city below. After weeks of debriefings, psychological evaluations, and sworn statements, the Halcyon Research Initiative had finally released her from their custody. Kane, Brooks, and Mercer had been similarly freed, though all had been bound by strict confidentiality agreements. The official story was simple. A catastrophic equipment failure had caused the collapse of the drilling site. The seismic anomaly had been reclassified as a natural formation, nothing more. The strange atmospheric phenomena observed in the region were attributed to unusual solar activity. Helena's phone chimed with a message. It was from Brooks. "Turn on the news, any channel." Heart racing, she grabbed the remote and switched on the television. Every major network was carrying the same breaking story. Astronomers worldwide were tracking a massive object that had suddenly appeared at the edge of the solar system. Its trajectory was taking it directly toward Earth. The phone chimed again. "It's happening." Helena sank into her chair, a strange calm settling over her. She had known this day would come, had tried to warn them, but Halcyon had buried the truth, confident in their ability to control the narrative. Now, as humanity faced its first contact with what lay beyond, she wondered if the entity in the vault had been the lesser evil after all. Perhaps it had been trying, in its alien way, to prepare them for what was coming, to transform them into something that could survive the hunters. The news anchor was speaking excitedly about potentially friendly alien contact, about the historic importance of the moment. Helena knew better. She remembered the symbols on the vault, the warnings left by beings who had encountered these hunters millions of years ago. She picked up her phone and sent a single message to the group. Chat connecting the 4 survivors. Remember the last translation? They do not come to explore. They do not come to conquer. They come to consume. Outside, the snow continued to fall, oblivious to the shadow now stretching across the solar system. A shadow that would soon engulf them all. As night fell, Helena looked up at the stars, wondering which one harbored the approaching threat. The entity from the vault had been sealed away once more, but its purpose had been served. The beacon had been lit, the signal sent, and now the hunters were coming to claim their prize. She thought about the vault, buried once more beneath the Antarctic ice. Whatever failsafe the ancient builders had created had worked. The immediate threat was contained, but in doing so they had inadvertently fulfilled the entity's true purpose, to summon the Devourers from beyond the stars. Somewhere in the depths of space, something ancient and hungry had heard the call. And now, inexorably, it was coming. Not for the entity in the vault, but for the world that had awakened it. Helena closed her curtains, shutting out the night sky. There would be time later for fear, for desperate plans and last stands. For now, all she could do was prepare for what was coming, and hope that humanity would prove more resilient than the civilization that had built the vault millions of years ago. Because the hunters were coming, and this time there would be nowhere to hide.